This Sunday on Capital Connection, recapping the state of the state.
Illinois, the state of our great state, is strong, unbreakable, and enduring.
And the Republican views are in. Surprise, they're not good.
This may be one of the most bitterly partisan State of the State addresses that I've witnessed under any governor.
Deputy Governor Andy Manar joins us to respond to Republican critics who say they're only balancing the budget with Biden bucks, in their words. And he's the Republican frontrunner running for governor. Gary Rabine joins us to respond to Governor Pritzker's State of the State, and Comptroller Susana Mendoza predicts when Illinois might get another credit upgrade. It's all coming up on Capital Connection.
From the Illinois State Capitol Rotunda, Capitol Bureau Chief Mark Maxwell is asking the tough questions. This is Capital Connection.
Welcome to Capital Connection. I'm Mark Maxwell reporting from the Illinois State House on this Sunday, February 6. Governor Pritzker delivered his election year State of the State speech under the dome at the old state capitol this Wednesday. He had to find that backup venue after the House and Senate canceled session, fearing that winter storm that would sock central Illinois with so much snowfall. Governor Pritzker started his speech promising a $1.7 billion surplus in the budget and offering the idea that Illinois might emerge from the cloud of the coronavirus better than we did when we entered it. He also thanked police officers, first responders, teachers, and healthcare workers who bore the brunt of the rises in crime, coronavirus closures, and cases.
I figured the least I could do as your governor was brave a snowstorm to deliver the State of the State address.
Governor Pritzker thanked healthcare workers, first responders, and teachers who showed up to work in person through uncertain times.
Our schools have remained safe and open. Of the more than 850 public school districts in our state, fewer than a dozen have had to take an adaptive pause recently because of COVID-19.
Most workers are back on the job. The state and national economies are growing. But the lingering effects of COVID-19 and impact from the flood of federal stimulus funds continue to cost consumers.
Inflation is squeezing Illinois families.
The governor proposed a one-time property tax rebate and temporary freezes on taxes for groceries and gas, combined worth $1 billion. Beyond the coronavirus and cost of living, he also addressed the rise in crime.
Crime is a complex and multifaceted problem to tackle, and it's cynical and counterproductive to simply shout, "Lock them up," while providing fewer resources to the people and programs that prevent crime in the first place.
Pritzker's budget would hire 300 new state police cadets and spend $20 million on a gang crime witness protection program.
That's fine. You have the money to do it, but it's not going to stop the street gangs from committing the continued crime in Chicago, the smash and grabs, the carjackings, because there's no consequences.
House Republican leader Jim Durkin was not impressed. He called the governor's speech a wish list to get reelected.
Right now, he's the beneficiary of a huge federal bailout, and also from the middle class and Illinois citizens who've been squeezed through inflation, which has caused higher revenues to come into the state of Illinois. He should give thanks to those people who unfortunately are the ones who are responsible for this added money.
I know that the same tired old characters who are always so desperate to badmouth Illinois will falsely attribute our fiscal success to the Federal American Rescue Plan Act. As usual, they're wrong.
Joining us now is Deputy Governor Andy Manar, a former state senator and top budget negotiator while he was a lawmaker here, now guiding the Pritzker administration's budget office and working there on this policy. It's good to have you with us.
Thanks for having me, Mark.
All right, how can people understand this claim that no federal COVID relief dollars were used to balance the budget? Make that make sense.
So I think we should start here. We should look at the past to help guide us on today, for example, the claims from Republicans across the state to show us that sound bites don't solve problems and sound bites don't balance budgets, sound bites don't pay off debt, sound bites don't control spending. So this is the one sound bite that we have heard now for several days that the Republicans are clinging to, literally clinging to. So here's the facts, Mark. ARPA money, or federal money, came to the state in July of last year, so just over 7 months ago. By that time, the Pritzker administration, because of the governor's principles, working with the General Assembly and the Comptroller, had brought unpaid bills down to nearly $3 billion, from a high just a few years ago of almost 17. Most of the short-term borrowing had been paid back before a dollar of federal revenue came to the state of Illinois.
You're
And
talking
beyond
about
that, the
ARPA
budget that
dollars specifically, right?
pardon me?
You're talking about the American Resource Plan dollars when you say federal, because there was federal dollars available to state and local, even under the Trump administration, to reimburse for COVID expenses. There was multiple infusions of federal dollars here.
There's multiple infusions of federal dollars across years, predating Governor Pritzker back to before I even started working for the state of Illinois. It's a function of budgeting. But let me just end here, is the budget that we're operating off of today, which is balanced, which is producing a surplus, did not assume any additional federal dollars to spend on anything, either COVID related or whatever else the Republicans decide to make up. I mean, they're clinging to this talking point, and I know why, because this budget proposal is solid. It continues the path that the governor put us on 3 years ago, which is on paying debts down, growing the economy, controlling spending, those things that frankly, their leader just a few years ago has probably the worst track record on in the history of the state. So that's why they're clinging on to this claim. It is completely false. And we will look forward to having this debate over the next couple months in front of the legislature.
And I want to move on to other parts of the budget, but just for one example, when we went through, and this was again before the American Resource Plan dollars became available in July, we went through some of the COVID expenses that different state agencies were racking up and submitting through the Comptroller's website. They're publicly available. Anybody watching this can go look it up right now and see. For example, the Department of Corrections would take prisoner meals, one of their big expenses, and claim that as a COVID expense. And so you have this regular occurring expense that would normally come out of the state's general revenue fund, and now it's being paid off by the federal COVID relief dollars. And it's technically it meets the qualifications, but that's free breathing room in the budget. I mean, you have to acknowledge that the federal relief created some flexibility, didn't it?
So there are no expenditures coming from the American Rescue Plan revenues from the federal government. No expenditures are being directed to be paid for from ARPA funds for things that otherwise we would not be occurring were it not for the pandemic, which is now in its fifth wave. So do we provide prisoners in the Department of Corrections meals? Yeah, we do. We do that as a course of regular business. We also do that as a course of what happens in the Department of Corrections during a global pandemic that is now, approaching where we are. So that's conflating two things that I understand. It's very easy to look at that and say, well, the meals should be paid out of regular general revenue funds. But if you look at that LBOC report, which is published on a monthly basis, you will see all of those expenditures. They're all defensible. They're all approved ARPA expenditures. Otherwise, we would have a problem with the federal government right away. Now, I want to remind you, Mark, it was not too long ago that the Republicans were saying that they couldn't find where money was being spent from federal funds. So we showed the reports, which are publicly available, as you just said, and now they're moving on to something else. So I go back to my point I made earlier. This budget is sound, it's disciplined, it pays off old bills, it controls spending, it grows the economy. Those are things that the Republicans hate to hear from a Democratic governor, and that's why they're clinging on to this one talking point.
The one thing that House Republican leader Jim Durkin did say, and the Pritzker budget proposal also alluded to, is that the economy just grew as corporations raked in record profits, highest level since 1950, as stock markets hit record highs. People shifted from buying services to goods. All of these things meant the state could collect more in taxes. So there was just more money available to start with before we got into any of the federal discussion, the political debate there. So I want to also set that expectation for people as they try to decipher the different political takes on this. But I heard something interesting in Governor Pritzker's proposal. There was a few common themes. He used words like discipline and fiscal responsibility. If Republicans don't vote to add $500 million to long-term pension debt to pay that down, if Republicans don't vote to pay down the backlog or to pay down the interfund borrowing, these structural deficits that have existed in Illinois, if Republicans don't endorse these ideas, should we expect Democrats to claim the mantle of fiscal responsibility?
We've already claimed it, Mark. We've already claimed it. And the governor has led the effort going back 3 years ago. This is his fourth budget, and they have been consistent in that they have been balanced when they were proposed. They were negotiated in balance, and they've been implemented to stay in balance. When expenditures needed to be cut, Governor Pritzker put forward cuts that were very challenging for Democrats, but he put them forward. When revenue estimates needed to be conservative rather than overly optimistic for political expediency, the governor introduced budgets with conservative revenue estimates. This mantle has already been claimed. I haven't heard a single idea from a Republican since the governor gave his speech about how they would continue to contain spending, balance a budget, pay down bills, pay off the college Illinois debt. That's been around for decades, and it's something that families count on to put their kids through college. The governor stepped forward and said, you know what, we're going to take care of that once and for all. So the mantle has been seized, and it's because of the governor's leadership over the past 4 years, cemented in the budget that he proposed on Wednesday. And again, we look forward to going through this budget in detail in front of the General Assembly, and we believe that we will have broad support, and we welcome Republican support to pay off old bills and to pay down our debts and to grow our economy and to contain spending.
We're already seeing some pushback on some of the different ideas and proposals. You mentioned this debate will continue for a few months. The governor set out some markers, but for example, some labor groups don't want to see the governor suspend or freeze the gas tax. There are other people who would look and say, okay, this is an election year. You want to show some sensitivity to the cost for consumers at the pump or at the grocery checkout lane with freezing the grocery tax. But why not take that $1 billion or so in tax relief and use it to leverage for future tax savings for up to $3.5 billion or more in, say, if you put that on the pension debt, it would be just by putting down a lot more than your minimum monthly payment on your credit card would. It would help you in the long run. It would help the state of Illinois to do that. Wouldn't that be the more prudent financial decision?
So the governor's budget proposal is part of the ongoing effort to make those prudent decisions. And we can go through each of the items, Mark, that he is proposing both to finish out this fiscal year and next fiscal year that involve paying off debts and bills that he inherited on the first day in office. We're poised to get rid of almost all of those things. Again, he didn't create those problems, he inherited those problems. And this budget is going as far as any governor has ever gone to do that.
Well, he created the gas tax hike.
Well, as far as the family relief plan, which is a hallmark of the governor's budget proposal, the idea from Republicans that this is something that's attached to an election, don't trivialize the impact of inflation on working families and what it means to their pocketbooks in the state of Illinois. This is a proposal that's grounded in essential goods and purchases, groceries, gasoline, property taxes, the things that really matter to people, and don't trivialize, and I've said this a couple times now, the impact of inflation on groceries and gasoline. The governor's plan is sound. It's part of a balanced budget that still pays down debt, that controls spending. It works well together. And who would have ever have thought that we could both pay down debts and give meaningful relief to working families at the same time? This budget accomplishes that.
It also includes $350 million more on top of the education funding that Illinois has already been putting there. I know you were close to the education funding formula, helping to be really its architect in the Senate, helping to guide that negotiation back in 2017. There is a political campaign going on right now, and one of the running mates, along with Richard Irvin, is Avery Bourne. She's also taking credit for this education funding formula, and that might be a issue of debate in the Republican primary. But when you look at those claims from the Irvin Bourne ticket that she was instrumental in helping pass the education funding formula, at the time you said it was a bipartisan victory. Do you still stand by that? Does she serve some credit for getting that across the finish line?
So I should be clear about a couple of things, Mark. That bill was a bipartisan bill. I mean, the votes, the votes in both the House and the Senate show that. But the final vote is one measure. The many votes and the many actions that were taken or not taken, I guess, in the part of so many people, I think is probably a more true measure of how that came about. But let me say this: the $350 million that's prioritized in Governor Pritzker's budget to continue to bridge that inequity gap, is additional investment in public schools. Just a couple of years ago, we were spending $1 billion on interest on old bills. I mean, we were wasting $1 billion on interest. Um, the governor's leadership has gotten rid of almost all of that, almost all of it. That frees up wasted dollars to be implemented in a way that is meaningful for children, like the evidence-based funding model. So, I'm less concerned, and I know the governor's less concerned about things that have happened years ago when it comes to bills or votes. What he's concerned about is making sure that we're not wasting dollars on interest, for example, and we're putting those dollars in underfunded classrooms, largely in downstate, largely in communities across the Chicagoland area that have been waiting for these dollars and are doing really good things with them today.
So these school districts are in line, if this budget becomes law, for another surplus or more money, extra money coming to their school districts. Some of them still are not fully 100% at the funding level that they need to be, but they're getting closer to it. They also have the infusion from federal dollars from the American Rescue Plan. And Governor Pritzker said local governments should look long and hard at cutting their property taxes. School districts, far and away, are the biggest driver of property taxes. Should those school districts start looking now at lowering their tax levies?
So, one of the beauties of the evidence-based funding model shows exactly what income should be coming to schools from local sources and how much should be coming from state sources, how much should be coming from federal sources, and what the appropriate balance is. I think that's a good measurement to start from. There's districts that are spending more than what the model says they need to spend in order to be successful. That's an exception to most, but most are still well under where they should be. And to get them there, that's going to take a host of investment, especially from state government over future years. The governor also made this point, Mark, that the best thing that we can do when it comes to schools is fund them at the state level so that the pressure on local property taxes is not there like it has been in the past. Again, predecessors of his did not prioritize school funding or prioritized it in a way that didn't get to the districts that have the highest tax rates. Districts in the south suburbs, for example, districts in the Metro East, like East St. Louis, for example, some of the highest rates in the state, but we're getting cut year after year after year. Governor's budget prioritizes the model so that money first goes to those districts with the highest tax rates.
All right, I appreciate you helping us walk through some of the budget discussion and the education funding there. Before we let you go, I am curious. A lot of our viewers are knew you, maybe some voted for you, voted against you. We're familiar with your election when you were a state senator, and then there was the choice to go into the Pritzker administration. I don't know if we've heard from you on that choice. Can you walk us through why you chose not to run for re-election and join the Pritzker administration? Is there something about this perch close to the second floor that you like better, or that is different for you and your skill set than advocating and debating on the floor of the Senate?
Yeah, I will say this. Well, I appreciate the question, Mark, and I'll say this. It's been about a year, a little bit over a year, since I made it was a tough choice to leave the Senate. I felt as if I had done what I had set out to do when I ran back in 2012. But for me, it boils down to two things. But number one is the couple of faces you see over my shoulder right here, along with my family. And number two is I believe that the governor has made incredible strides for our state. I saw the challenges that we faced each and every day as a member of the Senate through the Rauner administration and the devastation that enacted on the district that I had the privilege of representing. I met the governor early on in his campaign, and I believe in his vision for the state. And again, this budget is furtherance of that vision. It's not always easy to do what is right, but the governor leads with doing what is right, whether that's COVID response, whether that's paying off debt. It would have been a whole lot easier to put a budget on the table that spent hundreds of millions of dollars on things other than like overpaying the pension system. But the governor believes in doing what's right, and ultimately that's what led me to his office. And I believe that we're making great strides today, and I'm pleased to be part of that.
All right, Deputy Governor Andy Manar joining us. Thank you for hopping on. We look forward to seeing you as this debate plays out in the House and Senate.
You bet. Thanks, Mark.
When we come back, he's the Republican frontrunner, at least for now. Gary Rabine joins us to respond to Governor Pritzker's State of the State next.